Hello everyone, it is I, Fable, your new best friend. I've been trying to re-record this multiple times, and to be honest, I'm a little annoyed now, but this is something that was requested by one of my channel members. Well, not members, one of my Discord members. Here you go, a long video about the Forces of New Antioch by Mr.Bones, 40K.
When
Let's check it
talking
out.
about Trench Crusade last time, I found that one of the main comments from, well, the comments is that, it's gross, which is a fairly respectable and understandable criticism. A lot of Trench Crusade is, in fact, what you would refer to as icky, yucky, no like, which, to some degree, I can agree with.
You guys are babies,
when
man.
deciding the next Trench Crusade topic to discuss before moving on in my endless journey to circle the drain of grimdark content as fast as humanly possible, I decided to make it significantly less gross this time. That is because I wanted to discuss the topic of New Antioch, which are essentially kind of the sort of protagonists of the setting, sort of. Well, they are, mainly speaking, the main force we look at and can identify with as a group of people, due to them not being hyper-religious maniacs wearing pointy trongle hats, and them also not being horrifyingly disfigured Satan-worshipping monster men. I like the forces of New Antioch. I like specific forces of them a bit more as well. And in fact, they are my preferred faction to play in Trench Crusade. They are simple, fun, and pretty basic. You may look at them and think that they're a bit too plain, but nah, you kind of have to look a little bit deeper. You have to realize that in a universe with nothing but monsters on both sides, the man with the old Winchester rifle is the guy you kind of want at your side, right?
Yeah.
So before we discuss units and sub-factions and all that lame shit, we have some housekeeping here. Like, who is New Antioch? Why do they call it New Antioch? What happened to Old Antioch? And I guess just where do we even start with this? So I have a few places I want to discuss, so let's just start with what exactly Antioch was. See, once the gates of hell were opened up in Jerusalem, there needed to be a bit of a bastion city erected in order to deal with it. Why? Well, because if you didn't have a massive fucking wall in the way, then hell is going to subsume and eat the entirety of the world. So the people who founded Antioch decided to make a heavily fortified city specifically to fight hell. This city was completed a few years after the gates of hell were opened. I think it was 3 total, and was basically a technological marvel for the time. Not in like the we have guns in like the year 1000 kind of technological marvel, but more like a hey, look how fast we can produce these swords type of way. Which leads me to the first major thing that I kind of want to discuss that makes New Antioch kind of special, and that is that, okay, so Trench Crusade is alt history. It is an alt history World War I setting, which makes a lot of sense, but it's not just alt history in the sense that there are demons everywhere. It's alt history in the fact that we didn't evolve Kevlar. We didn't evolve very, very streamlined forms of defense and offense. Everything is pretty direct. And the reason why is because metallurgists of the time were incredibly endowed by the forces of the Holy Spirit, and thus were able to create armor and weapons that were imbued with marginally magical properties and properly blessed, which hurts heretics a little bit more than just being shot with a normal gun.
Which is really cool, though, by the way.
At hand in the city of Antioch, these items were actually able to be produced pretty fast and were pretty easily distributed to the various soldiers in the Levant. So Kevlar and flak armor doesn't make much sense, as with holy magic super metal you can block evil, mean, horrible demon bullets. But we aren't at the bullets yet. So with Antioch able to not really push back, they were at a minimum able to hold the forces of hell in place for a little while. So you'd think that at a certain point hell would have one big answer to Antioch, and yeah, they did. That's why this place is now gone, and now there is a new Antioch. Essentially, a while back, hell created a weapon that was so powerful that God himself for some reason couldn't stop it or warn the people of Antioch. And this weapon was so horribly powerful that we have never seen it ever be used again. So what exactly was this weapon? We don't know, but I assume it was basically just the equivalent of a hell nuclear bomb. Basically, it was dropped on Antioch, and not only was Antioch described as being utterly obliterated, it was described as being fucking wiped from the face of the earth, which is a bit horrifying to think of, but far be it for the forces of Christendom to be kept down by something as simple as your single biggest boon being taken away from you. They immediately went to build a new city, which is, New Antioch, which is apt, I guess. This city was known for being even larger, even more fortified, and even less likely to be blown up by some random apocalyptic siege gun from the Far East where Hell's ever-expanding grasp is located. This is when New Antioch hits its fucking stride. They started to advance the technology, even having a space program, and it builds...
Wait, they have a space program? This is the first time I'm hearing about the fact that New Antioch has a freaking space program. What the hell? That sounds amazing.
It up in a way based around necessity, the city that is, where everything kind of formed the same way that it did for us, but with some more minor caveats. There's a lot more of a slant to diesel punk with the technology more so than anything hype.
Hey, no, that's really cool. I want it. Sorry, shouldn't talk with my mouth full. I want that, guys. I need that in my life. What is that?
Hyper advanced like we ended up going towards. The Industrial Revolution never really got past the middle stages, right? So it led to Walker battle mechs and power armor that looks like it was powered by someone's faith in the Lord. So Pacific Rim 4, The Return of Christ aside, you see the mainstay ideas of New Antioch begin to take precedent. And that is that even if the war is shitty, even if things look fucking miserable, not a single person who is in those trenches would want to be anywhere else. Well, most of the time. Why? Because truth be told, I feel if most of you were told that the world is on the verge of an apocalyptic collapse because the forces of hell are invading everything you know and love, and you are one of the only people standing in the way of stopping an apocalypse, you'd probably acquiesce to the Duke Constantine's desires, right? So not many of the conscripts really feel that bad about being conscript. Duke Constantine the 11th, I believe, is currently the faction leader of the Forces of New Antioch. He's apparently a very stressed but very level-headed man who is in the constant throes of trying.
I mean, I'm gonna be completely honest. If you have to fight the forces of hell daily, of course you're gonna be freaking stressed. I'm glad he's still keeping it together, but Jesus Christ.
Manage the apocalypse, handling things better than most, but regardless, there are certain tithes of people to be sent to the city of New Antioch every month. But here's kind of where it goes back to what I was saying before. A lot of people will actually join up willingly just to deal with hell. A lot of people have a personal stake in it, obviously, because the hell is kind of destroying most of the world. So they band together in small war bands or large armies, go to New Antioch and swear fealty to good old Constantine, and they just kind of go off and do their own thing unless they're being commanded to do something else. And the reason why you would swear to New Antioch is specifically because there is a big benefit. The biggest strength of New Antioch in both aesthetic and in practice is that they are an incredibly industrialized faction. Behind the walls of the great city, there are many machines able to create the rifles and weapons needed in order to fight hell over and over again. Long gone are the days of ceremonial blessings when, in fact, you can bless all your rifles with the auto blesser that just needs to be refilled from time to time. Think of it like 40k, but the endless prayer actually does something, which is kind of cool. So, because of that, aesthetically, a lot of the New Antioch units and factions have a very standardized look to them. Smooth plate mail, well-ordered armor and weapons, power armor that looks like it came off an assembly line. I really gotta admit, I love the look of the heavy mechanized troopers. I think they're really, really cool. I like how they all look together, like as a faction, but we'll get there eventually. With all that being said, I should note that there is still a bit of discontent in the political sphere of New Antioch. People who, although wish to fight the forces of hell, sometimes don't swear fealty to Duke Constantine. They swear to God or the Lord or just the war effort as a whole. Thus, meaning they don't necessarily have anything against firing on any individuals wearing the same color as them, especially if they have their own agendas that they need to accomplish
Oh,
politically or
come
other.
on.
It's
That's
pretty
so
cute, but hey, a
stupid.
body is a body is a body, right? So with all the basics
That's so
of New
stupid.
Antioch being covered, let's get into those specific bodies. Who exactly are you going to see on the fields of battle, and how weird
Red
can it get?
Brigade.
The answer is pretty fucking weird.
Let's see, the Red Brigade, the Trench Pilgrims, the Battle Medics, the Battle Engineers, a buttload of heretics, you name it, they have
But
it.
before we get into something like the sniper priests that literally let Jesus take the wheel, let's discuss the humble yeomen. Yeomen are the backbone of the armies of New Antioch, being equipped with basic gear and being allowed to band together in these small war bands. The yeoman is pretty easy to explain, as are kind of most of the units of New Antioch. I think you're going to find that throughout the entirety of my ramblings about Trench Crusade, that the New Antioch units as a whole are kind of basic and easy to understand for the most part. But
That's
yeah, the
fine.
yeomen are
They don't
basically
have
the
to
men
be
and women
insane.
who swear service to the Duke of New Antioch, either meaningfully or not, and they are given the basic training necessary in order to not immediately explode on the battlefield. They do not have the best in terms of training, but what they make up for is numbers, and the fact that they are equipped with the weapons forged from New Antioch's foundries. These foundries are pretty much the best of the best of the best, so you can assume the weapons will always fire straight no matter what, at least. And in terms of combat effectiveness, they are slightly below heretic troopers, but they're above the most fodder basic enemy in the game. They
Oh,
step up
dear.
from yeomen, but like a large margin of a step up is the shock troopers. See, the shock troopers
Okay, not gonna lie, that armor looks really cool. I like it. I like it. I want that. I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna steal that right now, guys. Be right back.
is a class of elite soldier that do exactly what it says on the tin. They run face first into melee, or at least closer than most of their opponents would feel comfortable dealing with, and shock them. I swear, I saw more lore for these guys than there is. I swear, there was so much cool shit that I found, and I could not find it again. There was a
He's
source
lying,
I
guys.
had, and I lost it. I scoured the internet trying to find more than just this, but basically, all I found was that these are individuals who swear loyalty eternally to Duke Constantine, but are also proven to be the best in terms of knightly disposition and whatnot. These maniacs are the ones who run in with great swords and firing machine guns in order.
That sounds like something I would do if I was in the Holy War, not gonna lie. I'd run with a giant sword and a machine gun, and hopefully that I live long enough to take out many of the demons that are plaguing my homeland.
To mow down as many people as humanly possible before they get disintegrated themselves. They have a disproportionately high casualty rate, even considering how high it is across the board already. They usually are used on the front line in order to drive a wedge into heretic forces, but also are used to siege places due to their lower likelihood of breaking and running away when they see siege guns or demons guarding the gates.
That's a
Combat
plague
engineers are the
knight.
next duders I want to talk about. Their name is pretty self-explanatory, as basically they work to build up small emplacements for gun lines and break down enemy structures like bunkers, minefields, and so on and so forth. These guys are usually especially
pretty cool looking
badass
armor.
because they charge into minefields and actual fortified bunkers literally just to attach satchel charges to the sides of walls. They are usually decked out in especially heavy armor to make sure that if anything were to get in their way, they can survive it long enough to deliver whatever violent payload they need to drop in order to blow a hole in a giant wall. Lieutenants are, as the name would suggest, a rank of
it's all right.
authority in the armies of New Antioch. Having the ability to command small war bands or even larger platoons of soldiers, these fellas and fellettes are more or less someone who has proven their worth in some way, shape, or form. You have to be good at your job to get into this position. Sure, nepotism can definitely help, but if you don't have the skill to be a lieutenant, you're not going to last. Basically, they are in charge of commanding their troops to do whatever they need to win a battle. But they are also in charge of managing supply lines and the supplies that go into their troops. I mean, they're basically in charge of finding out where to grab food and weapons for them to restock in between the supplies coming in from New Antioch, which kind of translates to in the middle of a campaign, if they're in a bit of a tough spot, they might go and raid small villages that have nothing to do with the conflict in no man's land, which is a bit morally
The fact that there are small villages in no man's land is very interesting.
gray, but becomes less so when you realize they need this in order to fight the forces of hell, but like, whatever, man. The Trench Cleric is literally just the chaplain from 40k made into World War I whack job.
Yeah.
With a small portable shrine often attached to their back with the words of prayer dedicated to whatever patron they wish to contribute to, the Trench Cleric prays in the trenches. And gives the various effects on morale you'd expect from someone with this rank. They are a cleric, specifically assigned to keep God in the lives of the warband's men. This is a pretty useful thing, as it's also stated they can potentially smite people with their faith, which is fucking cool. Though it isn't potentially as cool as the other smiters in the entirety of the game. Like, we do have the witch burners, but they're not going to be discussed here until we discuss the trench pilgrims. But still impressive. You know? Speaking of impressive, let's talk about the sniper priest. Sniper priest is literally the idea of shouting the phrase, Jesus, take the wheel, but instead of crashing, he actually grabs the wheel and starts steering. It's fucking wild. Basically, the sniper priest has ritualistically gouged out their eyes in order to show their...
Wait, they're literally took out their own... Jesus Christ.
Faith in God to guide their aim, and thus they are now basically aiming with the help of God, listening and going off of the vibes he gives them in order to make their shot. Now, comically enough, this leads them to actually being uncomfortably accurate and not just a bunch of team-killing bastards. They usually have a sniper rifle, obviously from the name, but shout out to the actual insane person who gave us a model of a sniper priest that has a fucking Browning machine gun, because he really only needs God to nudge him a little at that point. The wall of 50 cal will probably do the rest. Aiming is kind of subjective, really. The combat medic is quite literally what you would expect. And I know this is a little boring in comparison to the past video, but a combat medic is there to just assist.
Is it bad that I actually like the design of the combat medic? I don't know. It makes me feel kind of like... I just like it. I can't explain it.
Assist the living and stitch up their wounds, and assist the dying by stabbing them in the heart with their misericord. Fun fact, the Hippocratic Oath has kind of been amended for these guys a little bit. Basically, they can mercy kill enemies now if they seem to be critically injured on the battlefield. And what is deemed to be a critical injury is really up to the combat medic, so that's kind of funny. All right, fellas, here's where we go to my favorite unit of the New Antioch guys. The heavy mechanized infantry. You ever watch Gene Rowe, the Wolf's Brigade?
No.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Basically, these dudes are the heavy machine armor wearing dudes that they use to block pretty much all damage on the front lines. They're a moving bulwark, a giant wall that blocks everything in its way.
I want the hammer and shield dude. I need him. I have an idea.
There's also another big benefit that due to their servos and how the armor works, as well as the soldier inside being hopped up on as many chemicals that they can pump into him without him dying in order to pilot the goddamn thing, they can hold weapons that a normal soldier would not be able to even pick up in one arm. So one-handing giant halberds and carrying tower shields, it's kind of cool. Shooting heavy machine guns with their bare hands is also kind of a big deal. Though typically a ranged unit, there is the Scottish regiments and the variant warband, which we'll talk about later, who are dedicated to making these guys melee focused rather than ranged, and they are equipped with fucking claymores. It's goddamn awesome. Just like with the Heretic Legions, I'm going to now start covering the fellas from the mercenary books that I think fit most with New Antioch, even though they can be taken by multiple factions, and in this case, any of the faithful. So, to start, I gotta cover one of the coolest and grimmest fates in the entirety of Trench Crusade, which is to become an observer. Basically, an observer is a guy or girl who is taken in by the Temple of the Holy Synod, which is a group I'll get into plan to someday, if I'm still doing Trench Crusade by the time I get back from Adepticon. By the way, hi, I'm going to Adepticon. Plug. But they are basically a group obsessed with communicating with God, and in that, they use his responses to dictate the war effort. What do I mean? Well, you get the Observer as the best example. The Observer is someone who is specifically trained to hear and not be killed by the word of God. They spend their entire life mostly alone and in complete silence, training to become something incredibly powerful, a living weapon controlled by God. Because of their special helmets, they have kind of a twofold set of abilities. So ability number one, they can, if focused upon enough, hear the voice of God directing them in the past, present, and future, which allows them to predict anything that is going to happen or understand anything that has. But also, the helmet itself allows them to transcribe the word of God into usable commands, and in the closest approximation of God's voice, bellow commands onto the battlefield that anyone, friend or foe, will listen to. Now, this causes heretic forces to retreat, even though they don't believe in God as the true savior. This also allows them to become a melee blender on the battlefield.
Melee
but here's
blender.
The big drawback,
Jesus.
that it's implied and openly stated in a few pieces of their lore that God's voice never leaves you. It exists in all points of your existence. So if you hear it at one point, you will hear it always. So these individuals have the deep bassy tones of an ethereal being ringing in their ears for all eternity, or at least until they die, and even then I don't even know what happens after. But that basically means that they need to take sedatives and hallucinogenic drugs in order to exist without going insane, and also so that they can sleep. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of a twofer. We talk about the Tank Hunter Communicant and his ammo bitch. And the Tank Hunter Communicant is made differently from the regular Communicant, and the reason is a bit odd. So, I might be misreading this, and I might be misinterpreting this, but in general, if you didn't know, a Communicant is made during this process known as communion. Fucking duh, right? Where they consume the flesh and or blood of the Metachrist, which is a cloned Jesus Christ that they have at the Super Vatican. It's complicated. And once they do so, their bodies grow bulkier, stronger, and they gain divine abilities that make them pretty much impossible to kill on the battlefield without massive artillery. But there is a different way to engage in communion that has kind of appeared in the last couple of years. Because of the limited amount of Metachrists to go around, there is this thing called the Mendelists.
I wonder if we'll ever learn about the Metachrist. Just in my understanding, it was an attempt to clone, like, Jesus, right?
Which are an order of science techno monks, I presume, that have found a way to take small samples of the Metachrist's blood and then synthesize more of it chemically in a lab, thus creating chemical communion as a possibility, and thus the creation of the Tank Hunters. See, the Tank Hunters consume the chemical communion blood and flesh that they grow in labs, and it causes them to grow in different ways. This allows them to become longer and stronger, but definitely not nearly as bulky as the regular communicants. These Tank Hunters are often incredibly unstable because of this untrue and unpolished form of communion, but they are still incredibly useful, being armed with the fucking Harkonnen cannon from Helsing that Saris Victoria uses, which is an anti-material rifle that can punch holes through pretty much anything.
Bitches love can. Get that bitch a cannon. Bitches love cannons.
And alongside them, you have the little ammo bitch that's right next to them. This little ammo bitch is just an ammo monk. They're a member of the Mendelist monks who created the chemical communion, and this chemical communion ammo monk specializes in bringing the communicant his ammunition so that he can focus on the task at hand, which is likely killing heretics. Why does he need that help? Because of the chemical communion likely robbing them of higher brain function sometimes, which means they definitely need a handler most of the time in order to be sent out. So the Tank Hunters are usually not as well received as regular communicants, but they are still a very good unit to have on your side. They're also incredibly expensive to just make. So what happens is the Mendelist monks actually hire them out to the highest bidder in order to fund the creation of more, which I think is pretty cool. It's a holy duty, and God willing, they will accomplish it. So let's get into the variant warbands. These are kind of the different flavors of what you could expect by playing New Antioch in different ways. They each have their own specific requirements and desires and a little bit of flavor behind them. So let's just get into it. So starting off, you ever just not want to be specifically non-denominational Christian in a game about non-denominational Christians and just instead wanted to choose a branch? Congrats, the Papal States Intervention Force is for you, and heads up, they are incredibly Catholic. Yeah, if you wanted to play the Roman Catholic army for your good Christian boys, then the Papal States are for you. They are smaller in force, but each of the members are handpicked and hand-trained by the Vatican as well as chosen by the Pope himself, especially for whatever tasks need to be done. Thus, this is represented in their warbands being a bit on the elite side, with better trained guys overall, but having less of them. And they also have better equipment as they're provided by the Vatican, or the Super Vatican, I guess, directly. They also don't need a lieutenant to play, they need a trench cleric to play. And that's because in their lore, they actually don't swear allegiance to the Duke of Antioch. They actually swear allegiance to the Pope instead, and that's where they get their supplies rather than New Antioch. God, I love this next one, though they aren't my favorite. The Ire Rangers are basically the Irish evolving backwards into berserking Roman Gauls again, or Picts, or like Celts? Okay, listen here, there are a lot of words that we had to describe them back in the day, and we're not 100% certain which ones weren't slurs created by the Romans, but regardless, the Ire Rangers are elite in a very different way than other elite warbands. Basically, in current year Ireland, there is not enough resources to go around. Surprise, surprise. And thus, they have to do their best with what they have. So, they learn hit and run tactics and live off the land. These fighters are usually lightly armored. Also, they mentioned the Berserker gene, which is possibly a real thing, probably just a myth. It's weird, but they actually have legit Celtic berserkers that can kind of go nuts on the battlefield. They are a part of a small group known as the Fianna, which is cool, as that's a reference to the mythological folk hero of Finn McCall, which was the first of the Fianna. Apparently, also, the berserker gene kind of mixes well with chemical communion, so you get these like weird communicants that are berserking Celts, which is neat. The Free States of Prussia are the German representation here in this world, and they are an incredibly useful faction, as they are more or less specialized in the idea of taking down exclusively high priority targets only. Their big claim to fame is the Stutztruppen, which, yes, I had to look up how to pronounce that, and I'm still probably saying it wrong, but basically they are the Prussians' modified version of shock troopers, though that is kind of underselling it. The Stutztruppen are kind of in a league of their own. They have the highest casualty rate of any troop in the New Antioch forces across the board, no exception, but have absolutely no concept of fear, and if you need a job done that is incredibly dangerous, they are your best option. They are drilled and trained for the front lines and need to meet a set of very strict criteria in order to be sent there. These criteria involve a lot of merit and a lot of training, but also they have to be unmarried and under the age of 25. They also have to undertake an oath, which is metal as all hell, and that is to each his own. To me, death. Alongside that, the Prussians have tank splitter swords that do exactly what it says on the tin. They split fucking tanks. There is even a bit of good-ass art for the tank splitters of Prussia, which is cool. Okay, so this is literally the Scottish New Antioch option, and basically how it works is the shores of Scotland were getting constantly assailed and raided by the heretic naval forces. You know, the submarines. And if you know anything about the ancient Scots, they took pretty much everything with absolutely no chill. The cantankerous people they are. Regardless, they specialize in one thing, defending their fucking shores. They don't really care about much else, but they do have a lot of options to do so. They have their mechanized heavy infantry specialized in melee rather than shooting. And alongside that, they get cheaper greatswords because they have the secrets to creating claymores in their midst. They are my favorite sub-faction of New Antioch and probably my second favorite sub-faction in the entirety of the game. And I plan on creating and painting a warband of them at some point once the STLs for the Red Brigade's Kickstarter get released, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. And the last of the forces is probably the most interesting one. Likely not my favorite, but they're definitely up there, and that is the Expeditionary Forces of Abyssinia. They have the most expansive lore as of right now for some reason of all the warbands, but the main thing to know is that Africa has mostly been taken over by the forces of hell, specifically even further, Mammon, the Lord of Greed, and his cult. There are many Christian rebel forces that work together in order to stop these madmen, and thus what was once Ethiopia is at the forefront of it, with the Kingdom of Abyssinia. I love them, and their whole shtick is melee swarm tactics. They are actually, weirdly enough, a direct counter to the Lord of Greed in a way, in as being decked out in high-priced and precious gems as a way to show that if they lost any of them, they would not care. They are blessed by God, and that is all they need to feel. The gems themselves are a gift to those around them. It's very charitable. They have a warrior caste known as the Chua, which I know I'm saying wrong, and they, like a lot of other special warbands, are based around being the first into the fray, though they are less shock and awe and more tearing apart a spider like a horde of angry-ass ants. They are seen as a prized possession in the eyes of the Duke of New Antioch due to their melee capabilities. But it is hard for them to get to New Antioch due to them having to cross the sea, which is kind of the heretics' biggest strong point, the naval raiding parties and so on. But you know what? I really love the aesthetic of these guys. Very lion-like. Kind of reminds me of the Celestial really cool. Lions, and I know that I don't want to draw as many comparisons with
Don't do it, because the Celestial Lions, I love them, and I will go on a freaking rant, I swear to God.
40k as I can, but it is very close. With all that out of the way, that's pretty much everything you need to know to understand the Forces of New Antioch and get into the game and play. They are your bread and butter faction for Trench Crusade. They are pretty okay at everything, with no major weaknesses aside from maybe not as good melee as other factions outside of some of their sub-factions. In short, if you want effective and reliable gun lines with some out-of-pocket options to do whatever else you wanted, New Antioch is where to go. If you want regimented and decorated honorable men in your army, New Antioch. If you want incredibly pious and zealous men who ride around in walker mechs that are covered in more blood than there would be secreted from a single man, okay, that's not New Antioch. That's actually who we're going to be covering next, the Trench Pilgrims, but that is for next time, good sir. What do you think of the Forces of New Antioch? Any favorite warbands or units? Make sure to let me know what you think in the comments. I loved seeing people ask for more Trench Crusade because I love.
Alrighty, guys. That was a long one. I'm probably gonna do another one later. I got some stuff to do today. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, please do like and subscribe. I actually learned some stuff about New Antioch, which I thought was pretty cool. The fact that they may or may not have a space program, which is also really, really fucking cool. But yeah, anyway, guys, love you all. Tell me what you know and think. If you want to help donate, please do so. Please check out Mr.Bones. 40k. He's a lad. Not really a fan of all his content, but hey, someone wanted me to do this, so here goes nothing. Also, excuse me. Bye.